জলবায়ু পরিবর্তনের মারাত্মক ঝুঁকির মধ্যে আছে বাংলাদেশ, অথচ এর জন্য বাংলাদেশ মোটেও দায়ী নয়। ইতোমধ্যে জলবায়ু পরিবর্তনের কারণে প্রাকৃতিক দুর্যোগের শিকার হয়ে ভীষণভাবে ক্ষতিগ্রস্ত হচ্ছে বাংলাদেশের মানুষ। এই বিষয়গুলো কি বাংলাদেশে অবস্থান করে উপলব্ধি করতে পারছেন জেমস গার্ডিনার, যিনি ঢাকায় যুক্তরাষ্ট্রের দূতাবাসের পক্ষ থেকে জলবায়ু পরিবর্তনের ইস্যুটি দেখভাল করছেন? তার দেশ যুক্তরাষ্ট্র কতটুকু পেরেছে বাংলাদেশের পাশে দাঁড়াতে? এই বিষয়গুলো নিয়ে সরাসরি প্রশ্ন ছিল জেমস গার্ডিনারের কাছে। We know the United States is one of the biggest development partners of Bangladesh. Bangladesh is among one of the most vulnerable countries to the negative impact of climate change. Can you tell us how or in which areas are both countries working together to combat climate change?
Well, first, thank you so much for giving me the opportunity to talk about climate change with you. I'd like to talk about the context of the relationship between the United States and Bangladesh to start. It's a relationship that goes back over 50 years. And during that time, the United States has provided about $8 billion worth of assistance to Bangladesh. Today, our USAID mission, or the United States Agency for International Development, has its largest mission in Asia here in Bangladesh. So there's a sincere commitment from the United States here in Bangladesh. Also, from a private sector perspective, U.S. companies have played a significant role in Bangladesh's development over the last several decades. We are the largest source of foreign direct investment to Bangladesh. So there is, again, a commitment there from U.S. business. When we talk about climate change, we have 9 different agencies, most with a presence here in Bangladesh, but some working remotely, working on efforts in climate change that comprise about 60 different programs that are planned or ongoing today. So we're very, very active when it comes to climate change. And most of that is in partnership with the government of Bangladesh. So our partnership is vibrant, it's very active. And I'll provide some examples. The U.S. Agency for International Development, USAID, focuses on areas such as biodiversity, conservation, natural resource management, disaster preparedness, clean energy, food security, as well as health. And so just a very broad spectrum of programs that are trying to address the impacts of climate change. Our U.S. Department of Agriculture, through its Foreign Agriculture Service, facilitates the export of over $500 million of food and then food for livestock to Bangladesh, again, focused on food security and making sure that the people here have adequate resources to nutritional food. They also provide research and technical assistance through partnerships with the government of Bangladesh. And then finally, the Department of State, who I work for, does very, very rewarding work through programs such as our climate outreach to youth. We build climate champions who are focused on learning more about. Similarly, we work with the private sector as well as government. Right now, at this moment, we have a group in the United States through a program that's run by our Department of Commerce that are looking at clean energy resources. They're meeting with some of the most innovative and advanced technologies in the United States to try and understand what assets are available to people here in Bangladesh. So that's just an idea of how we're working together.
You know, urban migration has become a serious problem in Bangladesh due to the impact of climate change, especially, salinity problem in agriculture sector as well as increasing natural disaster due to the climate change are greatly responsible for this urban migration. In that case, how the US government can play a role to address the problem?
It's an absolutely critical question. And what we have seen, I've been in Dhaka for a year. And to learn that almost 2,000 people a day are moving into Dhaka is just, it's hard to understand how significant a challenge that represents to Bangladesh. But from an agriculture perspective, the United States has programs that are active here. We have a program called Feed the Future, which is a whole of government program led by our U.S. Agency for International Development, that works with farmers or people that work in agriculture to understand ways of improving productivity, ways of changing and advancing, modernizing the way that they do things so that it uses less resources, moves away from toxic fertilizers, these types of things. The term that it most often is applied in this space is climate smart agriculture. So finding ways to respond to the fact that salinity is increasing and that normal seeds and normal crops don't respond better. And so we have a number of research efforts that are underway. Our U.S. Department of Agriculture partners with the Bangladesh Science Academy, and looking through that program, we funded over 130 separate projects. But we're also trying to develop seeds that are more saline resistant. We're trying to develop crops that use less water. And through all of these efforts, within the last year, we have seen 765,000 farmers in Bangladesh be able to actually raise the levels of income that they receive to the tune of about $500 million. So we're starting to see results, but there's much more to do.
We know there was a long discussion about the loss and damage for developing countries during the latest COP conference. Is there any update on this issue?
Climate vulnerable nations that pushed at COP27 to make sure that loss and damage stayed front and center, and then agreement was actually reached at COP27. So I have to make sure that I say that. The U.S. is committed to implementing that agreement, that the establishment of a fund will take place. And so what's happened since COP27 is the formation of a transitional committee comprising 22 different representatives from different countries around the world. And their task is to meet several times throughout the year, as well as host some workshops to decide on access of a fund, how a fund will be accessed, how do we make sure that we're incorporating the existing funds that may be relevant to this type of loss and damage solution going forward. Are we making sure also that we're looking at innovative solutions? And so this committee will also be looking at that. One of the ideas that Dr. Hook shared with us yesterday is the potential for international airline passengers to contribute something as part of their airfare that would go to climate change. This is an idea. The committee is looking at it, and so that's an example. Also, parametric insurance solutions or insurance and financial products that are based on parameters versus events is another concept that this committee will be looking at. The idea is that by COP28, at the end of this year in Dubai, the committee will be able to present recommendations to the conference that should be able to be adopted, we hope, and that we can drive forward then with a loss and damage solution.
Tell us about the methane plays and how the US is working with Bangladesh in that area.
Well, here I have to congratulate Bangladesh. Just before the COP27 got started in Sharm el-Sheikh, Bangladesh advised the United States that it was going to join the global methane pledge. The experts say somewhere between 30% and maybe upwards of 50% of the warming that we've experienced. It has a much more drastic warming effect than carbon dioxide, but it doesn't stay in the atmosphere as long. But the time it's there, it does more damage. And so at COP26 in Glasgow, Scotland, the United States, working together with partners from the EU, initiated the global methane pledge. And the idea was that we were going to challenge every country that committed to join the pledge to reduce their methane emissions by 30%. Now that's a significant challenge because methane comes from three very important industries. One is energy, and when you're producing oil as an example. The second is in the livestock industry. And so when you're raising cattle, when you're raising sheep, when you're raising other animals, methane is a natural byproduct from that process. And so because people continue to eat beef, because they continue to eat mutton, there will be a byproduct of methane. And then the third, which is quite relevant for Bangladesh, agriculture, absolutely. And the example that I like to use here is that when a rice paddy is filled with water, the oxygen under that rice paddy no longer, the soil under that rice paddy no longer gets access to the oxygen that it would normally have, and that creates conditions that give off methane. And so just by cultivating rice, as Bangladesh has done for generations, it also is producing methane. So what we agreed to at COP27, when Bangladesh pledged or joined the Global Methane Pledge, was the United States would work to provide technical assistance to Bangladesh in these three industries, in energy, agriculture, and livestock. And I'm very happy to say that in two of the three areas, we have already started. So our U.S. Department of Agriculture has recently, through its Food for Progress program, committed about $15 million to looking at livestock and looking at ways that we can perform methane abatement in the livestock industry. In the energy space, we have two different projects that we're looking at. One is called carbon capture and understanding how when carbon dioxide is produced through energy creation processes, we can harness that energy, but that also leads to potential methane abatement. And so we're running those projects in parallel, and again, working in partnership with the ministry here in Bangladesh. And we're waiting on the Ministry of Agriculture to approach us with a proposal. They're working on it now, so that we can look at methane abatement in agriculture. But all three areas we plan to work on, and we plan to focus on helping Bangladesh achieve its goal of reducing methane emissions by 30%.
How is the US working with Bangladesh on the climate-induced disaster risk reduction? Any new initiative in this regard?
Yes, we have contributed over the last 2 decades. We've built on order of about 900 additional shelters that provide refuge for about 700,000 people during times of a storm. We have also constructed in the northern part of the country about 2,300 plinths, which are raised earthen structures when there's flooding, when there's riverine flooding, that people are able to go up on top of and get out of harm's way. And in addition to that, we understand that during times of recovery from a cyclone, from flooding, people lose the opportunity to gain economically. And so we've also started about 5,000 savings and loans, or small community financial institutions, if you will, that allow people in that community to save money for that instance when they may need it, but then also have access to microfinance. And so that's an area that we have also focused on. The last thing, if I could mention in this space, is most of what I've been talking about is how the United States government has partnered with Bangladesh and worked on these efforts. But I'd be remiss if I didn't mention the U.S. private sector has also been contributing. And a company I'd like to highlight in this space, in the disaster preparedness space, is Google. Everybody knows Google. It's how we find things on the internet, and when we watch YouTube, we realize how valuable an asset that is. But about 3 years ago, Google began a project working with the Water Development Board to use its machine learning capabilities to predict where floods may happen in Bangladesh, given the weather circumstances. And they have been increasing that capability as machine learning gets smarter and learns more about how the information flows. And today, about 100 million Bangladeshis receive information from this partnership between Google and the Water Development Board that alerts them of potential flooding in their areas. And so again, climate change is such a significant challenge that it's going to take partnerships from government, from civil society, and from business to address all of the concerns.